Assalamu alaikum. Hello and welcome
Hi.
to Liberty Books. Today, my name is Mehr Husain, and I'm delighted to be in conversation with Muhammad Ali Bandial, who is the author of I Dream of Rain, published here by Liberty Books. You can see it here. That's Ali there. It's available now in Liberty Books. Ali, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Took a long time.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that people don't realize. They think that once you write the manuscript, your job is done. But
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
actually the easy part.
Yeah. So, because for me, it's exactly like that. Because I always figured like book लिख लिया, it's done now. It could
It's
be
done.
in bookstores any day now, and that's where the tough part starts. Looking for publication houses, and then the whole process of getting your book published. It's
Absolutely. And one of the things that just today somebody was saying that the art of literature is dying. And I thought I said, well, that's not entirely true. I mean, during COVID, Pakistan has seen this growth of authors and the publishing industry, and you're certainly part of it. With this is now your second book, if I'm not wrong.
Well, it's the second book that I wrote, but
Yes.
it's the first one that's published right now. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
Fantastic. So, Ali, let's dive straight in. Babar,
let's go.
you know, is
Yeah.
Babar, have you put in your elements, parts of your life into Babar? Because you too have gone to a military school, you
Boarding
grew
school.
up in a military environment. So, how much of your stuff is in Babar?
Okay, so everyone says that the first book is definitely almost always based on your own lifestyle, and I was like, huh, I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna write a book that's not at all based on me.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened, and while I was writing my second or third draft of my first book, I went down this nostalgic rabbit hole about
Yeah.
this incident, which made me write this book in like 3 months flat. And so yeah, it's inspired by a lot of real events. Like I'd say
Mhm.
80 to 90% of the events are real, but because fiction always imitates real life, so where
Absolutely.
fiction is confined is that in real life there are hundreds of subplots in every character, but in fiction you can restrict yourself to one main plot, and you can write the story within those plot lines. So I've like the characters, some of them are amalgamated in amongst like a couple of real life characters, and there is a lot of me in there. But also, if anyone from my family is watching, it's not that real, it's
No,
fictionalized.
of course. I mean, one borrows from one's life to sort of,
Exactly.
it's what you know, it's what you, and especially during COVID, where I think a lot of us, we
Yeah.
didn't actually make any new memories, but we had to live with the memories that we already had.
Yes.
So I think many of us sort of started delving inwards. One of the things that struck me were, Ali, about were the various themes that you explore, particularly relationships. And one of the most sacred ones, especially given in our South Asian context and given the Islamic context as well, is one of a child and a parent. And
Yeah.
here you've looked at a father and son dynamic. And I think the most, poignant thing, and this is why I said that you addressed it so sensitively, was how easy it is for the external to shape this sacred relationship between a father and a son. You think that there's nothing that can come between a child and a parent,
Yeah.
and especially between a father and a son, but that's not true. The external defines so much, does it not?
I completely agree, because it's so funny. You can be completely yourself with your mother, because mothers are like you can say anything to them, but fathers, like, there's very little verbal communication as such, because he's the head of the family, so you're always looking for his approval. But at the same time, the love that you have, you just can't communicate at that age. And I realized that when I had my daughter myself, and every time I come home, uh, my wife and my daughter, they'll be recounting stories that they've talked about, and I'll be like, but why didn't you share that with me? And my daughter would just rub her toe or shrug. And I realized that because with fathers and children, that bond, even though it's very strong, but you just can't put it into words. And during COVID, I realized that there are a lot of things that I never told my father. Like, the book is basically a love letter between a son and a father. How you let him know how much you care and what you couldn't say during that part of your life. So that's what Babar comes to realize through the course of events.
Absolutely. And what you also do is you also try to show Baba's relationship and how he's exploring the concept of love, whether it's
Yeah,
with his sister, whether it's with the fellow Sabahat, whether it's with his dadi. You've really sort of shown that Babar wants to love and he wants to be loved and he's trying to find it through different characters, but none of them are satisfying him because he wants to fulfill that void with his father.
exactly, exactly.
But what also struck me was the father son dynamic. There's this very very sort of there's a scene which is extremely strong. The one which has the goat, where Babar goes out and he touches the goat's head, and it's Eid. And the
Yeah.
whole idea of this Eid, the whole idea of the sacrifice is to strengthen bonds. But here it's having the opposite effect.
Yeah. So,
I had
you're
to
at that.
reread that scene, twice to actually let it sink in like, oh my goodness,
Yeah, because
what is going on here?
exactly, it's like it's the most sacred bond. And at that time children don't have the complete picture of what's happening. So the event in and of itself, when it comes to a child's mind, it's free association, and they feel abandoned and they feel like lost completely. And that's what Babar felt at that time when he remembered the incident again. And that's what led to the estrangement over the period of years, and then how he tries to reconcile it again once that incident happens. So
Absolutely. So, but explain something to me, Ali. You see Babar having a relationship with his sister, and it's one of the most pure relationships that he has in his life. But he doesn't seem to have the same one with his brother. Why is that?
because
I mean, there's an
in our,
unspoken assumption that siblings would always stick together, but that's not always the case, is it?
it is and it isn't, because when you're growing up, a lot of your feelings and a lot of your emotions are dictated to you, down through society and family, and this is how you're supposed to be felt. You're the only child, you're the only son, you're the natural heir, and then another pretender comes. And then as you grow up, you realize, I mean, this is what society is telling me. He's just as much my blood as my sister. And that's what the characters start to realize, that all those when you're in a difficult situation, you try to attach blame to everyone but yourself. And sometimes siblings or somebody younger than you is the easiest target. And then you realize, like, he could be my strongest ally, and he's my closest blood relation. And that's where you start to redefine your relationships, and you strengthen your bonds.
That's right. That's very true. Then it's interesting how you've created one set of family, which is Babar's biological family. That's his home. That's where he longs to be. And yet he's not there in any form,
Yeah.
physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. But then on the other hand, you have the Amjads and the home that they create for Babar. And that's when I personally felt that I saw Babar grow with the Amjads, whether it was pleasant or unpleasant, nice or
Yeah,
not
yeah,
nice, whether it was with Bushri and all the other people, kids being there or not. But that's where I really saw Babar sort of realize things about himself,
yeah.
about relationships and everything. Whereas in his home, he seems more
He could
lost.
be, yeah, he could do anything at his home, but nobody would blame him or anything. But here, he
Yes.
realized that he was held accountable. There was nobody, no father,
Yes.
mother, sisters, to
No.
take the blame. So that's
Absolutely.
why how he came to these bonds were, in a way, they started off on the wrong footing, but then they grew organically and became I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, they
No, no, don't
became
give away too much. But yeah, I mean, the idea is you see Babar coming into his own, and finally you get a sense of who he is.
who
What
he
I
is
found,
exactly.
what I found really interesting was how you connect these two, I suppose, these two homes, these two families through that letter that Babar writes.
Yeah, that's I mean, yeah, I mean, because he was still grappling with the idea of his predicament, and he was still thinking, there's got to be a mistake. This can't go on, like, and the communication hasn't been sent through properly. And once I do that, like a switch, everything will be fine. And once that bridge is crossed, he's got to do some fast thinking and redefine what he thinks and how he's going to go about it. Because living in a boarding school or living by yourself, you develop this second personality, who's a very rational person, who sort of tells you, okay, we're in this right now, so how are we going to go about it? I mean, you could cry and you can, do whatever you want, but nobody's gonna care that much. Everyone's in the same boat as you, so it's just you and me, your invisible friend. So that's how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, I can certainly relate to that, having gone to, being, I was a day boarder. So I
Oh,
could
really?
see that how he was sort of coming into his own and trying to figure out relationships again. And again, it just struck me like how he's looking for something to
Hold
claim
on
as
to,
his,
yeah, yeah,
yes, to hold on to, and he's had to go through this journey, which is
yeah,
quite interesting as he grows with every single interaction.
yeah.
um what I really enjoyed most, Ali, and I have to really commend you for this, is how you sprinkled your text with all these cultural references that make us up as the Pakistani identity. People
E-
think that either if you're Pakistani, you're either one thing or another. You cannot be an
exactly.
amalgamation
Yeah,
of different
yeah,
things. So I love the whole idea of Boniem,
yeah,
and then you put in the different surats as well, because as
yeah.
jitne bhi hum cool बनने की कोशिश करें, जितना भी हम कुछ
Yeah,
करने
you
की,
can't run away from it.
जब आप जितना मर्जी कह दें कि मैं सेक्युलर हूं, मैं यूं हूं, जब वो कहते हैं ना, you'll never find an atheist on a sinking ship. You'll never
Exactly,
find,
exactly. Yeah,
जब when
yeah.
something goes wrong, सब कुछ भूल जाता है, and you start reciting the surats that you've ignored for so long. And वाकई
So true. Yeah.
वो बात भी आ जाती है when you think अच्छा something bad has happened, मुझे कोई आयत याद नहीं आई, मैंने कुछ गलत कह दिया,
Yes,
बिल्कुल
exactly.
that
So
is definitely part of us. And of
yeah.
course, what I loved was how you brought in things like ghutti. Meaning, I mean,
So
these
these
are
are the
such,
things you grew up with. Whenever you do something wrong, your dadi or your mother or somebody would say, "इसको घुट्टी उसकी लगी हुई है, या वो वाली हरकत कर रहा है, वो भी
bilkul,
ऐसे ही करता था."
bilkul. It's
Yeah.
like this, and it's logical in a strange way. It's logical कि हाँ वजह ही यही हो सकती है जी, और तो कोई वजह ही नहीं हो सकती, मतलब कोई logical rational reason यही है, घुट्टी वो दी
Yeah.
गई थी. And then you bring in Musarrat Nazir and Baba Farid Ganj. I mean,
No,
it was
that's
so
very.
lovely
It was,
to come
yeah.
across these, because don't you feel, Ali, that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that because we end up writing in English, we automatically start catering to a Western audience, completely ignoring what can actually help our local readers connect with us as writers.
Very
So
true. Because for the sorry to cut you, but
no,
for the
no, please,
longest time,
please.
I've been watching. I'm a huge movie buff as well, and I've been reading depictions of Pakistan, and it's so two dimensional, and it's so not us. And growing up, I always loved westerns and every sort of novels, and they'd write about, like, any character. He'd say, just I just got off of Fifth Street and I went there, and you're supposed to know, oh, this means New York. And I always felt like,
You're
we were
supposed to know कि बस यही है, this is it.
हाँ यही है मतलब, we are also normally functioning and we've got a proper modern society, but we somehow in our writings it come across as very apologetic, and we revert back to their depictions of how we're supposed to be. So I just wanted my writing to be, sort of like a nostalgic trip down memory lane, also about the time that we lived in and how it was very fulfilling and just as rich as any Western, society.
One of the things that I noticed was, Ali, you did not dwell too much on describing the surroundings, which I think many of us here in South Asia, or at least in Pakistan, we tend to sort of fall into the trap of that. Matlab, we want to really infuse the reader into our environment, but you haven't done that. Is it because you were focusing more on relationships, or you just felt that why should I? Matlab, this is it. This is what we have on offer. Was it a
It was
conscious
a little,
decision?
yeah. It was a little bit of both, because I was trying to, tell the narrative from the point of view of a 12-year-old. And at that time, this event was the most important thing to him. And it was more of the internal terrain of the mind, and, how the relationships were changing. So I was focused more on that. And at the same time, everyone's impression of the external surroundings are different, and I didn't want the book to, veer off into that territory. So it was a sort of like a conscious decision.
Absolutely. Now, Ali, I'd like to ask you about the whole idea of putting this in a military background. Do you feel that the same story would have applied had it not been in a military background? The reason why I'm asking is because of the father son dynamic. You know, you have these stereotypes that the father comes from is part of the military, and therefore he's a certain way and a certain persona is what's assigned to him. But there are these tender moments which just ultimately show that it really doesn't matter,
It
military,
doesn't.
non-military.
Yeah,
It's just a relationship, ek baap hai aur ek
exactly.
beta hai.
Exactly, and the crux of it is a father-son relationship. He could have been anybody, he might not even have been in the army. He could have been a shopkeeper, but some the incident could have been something else. But it led to, both of them confronting this chasm that had sprung up between them, and how they crossed that. So yeah, I mean the setting was basically, it could have been anything.
Absolutely. Now, just going back to what you said earlier, that you wrote this in 3 months flat.
Yeah.
Do you feel that COVID caused many of us to sort of really utilize our time better and really rethink of how we're spending our time? Initially I remember there was a lot of Netflixing going on, but
Mhm.
globally there's been a surge in books being printed and books being produced, and the type of books, people really began to think inwards, like what are we doing and what are we consuming? Do you feel that you could have written this book at any other time had it not been for COVID? Or was this a very special time for you to produce such a piece of work?
So I normally joke with my friends because that COVID was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it gave me such a concentrated amount of time to, delve into my thoughts. And I don't want to say that I couldn't have written it in any other time, because I want to be able to, continue to write. But it would have taken a lot more effort and, time to have done this. But in COVID, it was just the perfect time. It's like the whole world shut down, and it was just me and the manuscript. And I was able to focus. I got a laser focus. Like, I had nothing else to do except for the TV, but I used to move away to a separate room, and I just wrote, and the words just kept pouring out. Like, it was like I was writing 5-10,000 words a day.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
That's fantastic. And how many hours would you spend in a day or in the evening?
It was at night when both my wife and my daughter had gone to sleep. The funny part is, so writing this book also helped me come close to my daughter. Like I told you how I realized that, she wasn't sharing everything with me, so I made a conscious effort to, discuss what I was writing. And after she'd hugged me and consoled with me that, oh, you were also sent to boarding school, so then I had to bribe her not to discuss the book with her grandparents before it came out.
Yes,
And
of
then
course.
she was adamant that we had to put a unicorn inside the book, but we said maybe we'll do it in the next one. So when they were asleep, and I think बीच में रमजान भी आया था. So before Seri and after 12, that's when I sit down and concentrate on the work every night.
Ultimately, it does come down to discipline, doesn't it, when it comes to
It does,
writing?
it does, it does. Because I followed a lot of writer communities at that time too, and I wanted to know, what's the proper way to write. And they'd say you make a outline and then write. But for the life of me, I could never make an outline. Whenever even I tried, once I started writing, my characters had a mind of their own, and they would always go against what I wrote. So I think I just I read a Harukumi once, and he said a writer is more of a vessel, and what he does is he lets the story flow through him, and you've just got to put the ingredients onto the page, and that's it. You don't have to tell the reader, this is what you're supposed to feel. You just put the ingredients there, and every reader can come up with their own image of what the story is about. So that's what I've tried to do. Like I've tried to the character is a lot like myself, but at the same time I want every reader to be able to conjure up an image that resonates with them about the book, the characters, and everything.
Well, I mean, in your book, you've got all these characters, and they all have their own mini plots, what's going on in their lives. They're multi layered, and yet somehow they all come together. The central character, of course, being Babar. But it's interesting how it all sort of pans out. It's like a web that you've got going on here. And then you have intergenerational, things happening, the dadi, the parents, the sisters, the friends, and then this, there's that inkling when Babar's sister is expecting that the next generation
Might.
might be
Yeah.
different. They might be able to explore their relationships without the confines of society. Do you
Yeah.
feel that Ali Pakistani writing is changing, generally speaking? I mean, we've seen different forms of literature come forth where people are sort of tackling societal issues like you've done here. You've addressed some very crucial, unsaid, unspoken truths about families. Do you feel that our generation of writers, or well, yours, you're younger, has sort of they're bolder, they're braver, and they're really tackling society through fiction in particular?
Definitely. I'd say the younger generation is much smarter than me. I mean, they've latched onto this unique, our own
आप भी young
identity.
generation के ही हो अदी आप ही इसी
ऐसा
generation
कुछ
के ही
नहीं. I
हैं
mean, they're much younger people than me who've already made it and they're writing, and I applaud them, and I'm seriously inspired by them, and they're doing a much better job than what we had to look up to when we were growing up. So that's why so I grew up idealizing cowboys and westerns, and it was just like the character in the book. And it's much later than I realized, like we've got pretty much the same characters in over here also. I mean, they don't wear cowboy boots, but the narrative and the plot line still remain the same. And they're just as heroic and as noble. And I mean, the young generation, some of these writers already have written about this stuff. And I have, like I said, I've got great hopes on Pakistani South Asian literature.
well, I mean, that's you sort of hit the nail on the head. It's about the universal, connection of
Yeah.
human beings, and this is something that we've been trying to speak to, non-Pakistani markets about, that ultimately, yes, our books and our writers and our authors are based very much in this particular context, but the themes that they write about and what they're exploring is
They're
very much
universal. Exactly.
universal. That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, in I Dream of Rain, the father son thing, it just got me thinking that this could be anyone out there.
Yeah.
Anyone. Yeah,
It-
you put it in a military context, but that's what you know, and that's what you're familiar with, and that's what you're exploring. And that's natural. But, you know, it's so important for us to start exploring these things through the written word anyway. We see them happening on dramas, and
yeah.
they're not exactly helping the situation. But
Yeah. I mean, back when I was in Pakistan, like my mother's a huge fan of these dramas, and it's a staple of
my mother
every
as well.
household. Yeah,
Bilkul.
and I used to mock her, and but at the same time, I hope we move away from some of these tropes and um you know, explore. There's so much more that we could write about besides, what sells, and here's hoping, I mean, that more stories like these come to television and even books.
Absolutely. I think it is about time that we sort of opened up the creative space in terms of the type of content that's being out because, yes, books need to sell, but books should also be treated as items of value in
Exactly.
terms of how they impact our lives and what they can do to raise awareness and, you know, um, just open up so many things that we all know exist in our society but are never really spoken about. Like, for example, you said that the idea of a father. What is a father? How is a father seen in our society? And ultimately, he's a man, he's
He's
a human
human. Yeah,
being.
he's as flawed as anybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that you focus on his flaws, especially towards the end when, him and Baba have a conversation and so many
Yeah.
unspoken truths come out. And the
Come out.
tragedy is that one is just left thinking, kitna waqt guzar gaya tha,
Good. Exactly. Yeah.
you know? And I think time is something we've become very conscious of. Well, at least I hope we have during COVID,
Yeah.
especially when people talk about the past 2 years having gone by and there's nothing. So I think you don't mention time, but you certainly do imply.
Imply exactly. Because when you're growing up, your parents are like infallible, and you've put them on a pedestal. And while that is good, but at the same time, maturity is all about realizing that they don't have a clue as well, and they're trying the best that they know based on what the environment is. And once you realize that, all the resentment and all the blame goes away, and I believe it just strengthens the bonds, because they're human as well. And if any mistakes are made, they weren't made intentionally. So that's what the main
No,
character
you
also
you
about.
you
Yeah.
you raised a very important point, and I see these conversations happening now. In person, on online forums, and discussions. The idea of parenting and how I think our generation is sort of realizing many things about our parents and being like, okay, I think I understand now. I may not agree with it, but I do
Yeah.
understand. वो वाली बात आ रही है कि ठीक है,
Uh,
ये हुआ था, आपने ये किया था और ठीक किया था, चले जो आपको पता था उस वक्त आपने वही किया.
exactly. I mean,
But
we still just, I like to sometimes make them feel guilty and blame them, but that's only
I
like,
think that's part of the healing, Ali. That's part
yeah.
of the healing. A lot of people say, हमारे हाथ से ऐसा होता है ना कि you're taught that never to question your parents, never to
Yeah.
say anything. But
Uh,
you have to sometimes,
have a dialogue. You should
yes,
always leave room open for dialogue.
have a dialogue and make them aware that this is how I'm feeling.
I felt, yeah.
And it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy. I would never sit here and glamorize it with, like, having chai and nice
Mhm.
biscuits and
Yeah.
yellow cake. उस तरह की बात नहीं होती. But it's about helping ourselves and healing ourselves and relieving them of wondering, क्या हो गया, क्या
Huh.
हुआ था, पता
Huh.
नहीं.
Huh.
So you
Exactly.
are you working on any future books now, Ali?
I am. So the book that I told you, the first one, it's like I think this one will come out next, hopefully, inshallah. And then
Inshallah.
I'm right now working on a third book, which is still
Fantastic.
halfway. Yeah.
And are you still exploring the same themes?
Um, um, I sort of, yeah. I mean, so my thing is, when I am reading somebody, I always, look for those themes. Like a book, every author has his or own style, and sometimes I get turned off by a writer when I see the same tropes again and again in every consequent story. So while I'll try to consciously avoid that, but then. I write stories which I would also love to read as a reader, because I was first and foremost a reader myself. So I don't plan that much ahead as to, I'm not going to consciously do that, or I'm going to address this topic. It's I just can't explain it. It's like when the inspiration comes for a story, I just go with the flow. It's sort of like that.
Absolutely. And have you been reading any books recently?
I do. I love to revisit a lot of old books from time to time as well. So lately, I've also moved to non-fiction as well. But fiction, I'm always reading. Like one book that I recently reread, like the fifth or sixth time, was Gregory David Roberts' Shantaram.
Ah,
I
yes, of
just
course.
love that book. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's Jonathan Tropper. I love his books. Like there's one. This is where I leave you. There's a movie also based on it. So I love his style of writing, in which he also most of his books deal with personal relationships, and he sort of writes about them in a funny way. Also, like there's a lot of humor sprinkled in amongst the serious topics. So right now I'm very like he's sort of my muse for now.
Fantastic. So hopefully we'll see more humor in your next book.
Inshallah, inshallah, yeah.
I mean, humor is something that I think most of us use as a coping mechanism anyway, to get
That
us
too,
through
yeah,
life and to sort of, help us cope and
yeah,
understand many things that are not normally spoken about.
yeah,
So I
exactly,
think it is a great, element in any novel.
yeah.
Absolutely. Ali, do you feel that, with Pakistani authors in particular, I've seen a lot of them, including yourself, really have to push forward in terms of marketing their work, of doing a lot more publicity for their books. And this is a conversation that's been happening abroad as well, that the role of the author is no longer just to write it, but to act as their own personal PR and marketing. How do you feel about that?
So for the longest time, I was in complete denial because I'm an introvert, and like I was just hoping against hope. Like I really hope I don't have to do this, because marketing is like completely anathema to me. And but yeah, it's just like you said. Now any literary agent or publishing house would also want to know how much can you contribute to the marketing. And I really don't know what to say, because for some of us, it's always assumed that since you write, you can also speak about it and go out and market it as well, which isn't the case. Because sometimes some of us turn towards writing because we would rather have this divide between us and the world, and writing, putting our thoughts down on paper is much easier than having to speak it out ourselves. But I right now I am trying to cross that divide, and it is what it is. I don't know.
It is what it is, and I think it's a work in progress, especially
It
within
is.
Pakistan. As now, after many years, we're seeing this sort of resurgence, this new wave of writers coming about, and new publishing houses mushrooming as well. And I think we're all in this together. We're also trying to figure it out. कि क्या
Yeah.
करना है, कैसे करना है, and how can we sort of rebuild what once was a lovely industry, and sadly it died. And I must commend writers like you who are still contributing and who still have faith in local publishing houses and really sort of putting your work out there, because
Yeah,
it's not easy. It's not easy.
but I have to like commend people like you, and there are a lot of writers who've gone ahead before me. You know, they've broken through this barrier, and I was always very conscious that, you know, I want this book to be completely true to our roots, and the threat, the danger of going to, you know, a publishing house abroad was, you know, what if they say कि नहीं ये change कर दें, this is what we come to expect of you, so ये change कर दें, ये element डाल दें. So that, and then, you know, the Pakistani writing community is very supportive of each other. The few authors that I reached out to, they've been very helpful. Just like you, there have been others also that have, you know, they instantly replied, and I was very encouraged, and I've got great hopes, just like you said.
Absolutely. I mean, just looking at your cover, you've got, wonderful blouse by Awais Khan and Taha Kehar, which is wonderful to
And
see.
you,
But
yeah.
and me. But the point is, we're all in this together ultimately.
Exactly.
So, like I said, I must thank you for your book, Ali.
Thank
We're near the end of our session. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any area that I may not have covered and you want to focus on?
you.
Now's your time. Just putting you on the spot here.
No, I guess that's it. I mean, so the incident that starts off with the book, that's exactly, not exactly, but I remember very clearly. I just come back from college, and my father had a very serious accident. Not like this, but, and before the phone rang, I had a premonition, you know, that something's bad happened. And it was very surreal at that moment, because at one point I was dealing with this whole feeling. At the same time, I realized, you know, how did I know that this was about to happen? And that thought stayed with me, and during COVID I got to realize that trauma had never, you know, really left me. So that was the genesis of the whole book. And then, you know, you go down this whole rabbit hole of what is this all supposed to mean, and my father's in another country, I'm here, my parents are there, and, you know, it could end anytime. And a lot of thoughts and feelings have been left unsaid. So that's what led to me, you know, starting to write this book.
Absolutely. The trauma of the unsaid.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing that can sort of heal that until you start exploring it, as difficult as it may be.
True, true.
Well, Ali, thank you so much. I wish
Thank
you
you.
well with your literary journey ahead. I look forward to reading more books by you.
Inshallah.
And very well done. And once again, this is I Dream of Rain. I'll just put it up here. It's available on the website of Liberty Books, which is www.libertybooks.com. So get your copies today. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Ali, and
Thank you. Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.